The offseason is underway for the Bulls. We have the NBA draft at the end of next month on June 23rd, which the Bulls will have the 18th pick in the draft. Then free agency will commence shortly thereafter on July 1st. So back to the normal schedule the league was at before the pandemic. And with that, there are a lot of question marks as it relates to this Bulls roster going into the offseason and heading into 2022-23. And what changes will be made to the roster, whether it be through free agency acquisitions, re-signing players, or shipping players off via trade. So in today's video, we're going to be going through every player on the Bulls roster and the likelihood, giving an actual percentage of chances that they are to return, whether they're going to be staying with the Bulls or going to be on their way out. So what's going on, everyone? You were listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, a couple of qualifiers for how I am measuring a player's chances of staying with the Bulls versus them leaving the team. Of course, it's going to be based on how many years a player has left on their contract, what their projected trade value would be if they were to be moved as a factor in whether they return, and then of course based on which players are going to be free agents and how likely they are to be re-signed based on their value and impact to the organization and whether the Bulls will actually have cap space to do so. So I'm going to start with the players who are the most likely to return all the way down to the ones who are, without question, not going to be in a Bulls uniform next season. I'm going to start with Demar Derozan. DeRozan, who has had one of the best seasons of his career at the age of 32, averaging a career high in scoring, had one of the most efficient scoring seasons, not even just from the field, but also his most efficient three-point shooting season on the volume he was putting up at 35% on 1.9 attempts, which for DeMar DeRozan, it's pretty good. I know it's not good by normal NBA standards in today's NBA anyway, but that's pretty good for DeRozan. He was selected as an all-star starter, will likely make another all-NBA selection. He has 2 years left on his contract, and without question, unless the Bulls absolutely blow up the team, which I think is incredibly unlikely, DeRozan will be 100% back next season with the Chicago Bulls. Now, next we've got Lonzo Ball. I mean, for Lonzo, obviously the biggest question mark for him is his health. What's going on with his ailing knee? He's really struggled to stay healthy in all 5 seasons that he's had in the NBA. It's very concerning if you're the Bulls, especially when he's only 24 years old and is already having these kind of injury issues, and you just signed him to a long-term contract to be your starting point guard for the foreseeable future. But because Lonzo still does have 3 years left on his contract, you saw the value and impact he had on the court when he did play as a very active defender, high basketball IQ, a guy who can help space the floor with his three-point shooting, a very effective playmaker in transition. It was clear the Bulls really missed Lonzo down the stretch of the NBA season and going into the playoffs. And as long as Lonzo can get his knee right and actually stay healthy, he's going to be a very important piece for this franchise going forward, especially when you talk about the need for his defense. When you have guys like DeMar, Zach, and Vooch who are not great defenders, you need a guy like Lonzo to complement that starting lineup. Thus, there is no doubt in my mind that Lonzo Ball is going to be returning for next season. I would give that a 100% chance. The next guy that I think is the most likely to come back is actually Alex Caruso. Yes, I have Caruso ahead of guys like Zach Levine and Nikola Vuchevich to be staying with the Bulls, even though I think both of those guys are going to be staying as well, and I'll cover them in a little bit. But for Caruso, still under contract, with 3 years left on his deal, a very favorable deal for his level of impact. Another guy, you need to stay healthy, of course, but the energy he brings and the defensive intensity that he provides, all of those intangibles, knowing where he needs to be, coaching guys and letting them know where they need to be both on and off the court. He's obviously a fan favorite. And not only that, because Caruso and his contract relative to his production value is at a very good rate, you could argue he's very underpaid. He's another guy who will 100% be back playing with the Bulls next season. Next, I've got Patrick Williams. As much trade speculation, rumors that went around last season leading up to the trade deadline that the Bulls were going to be looking to move Patrick to get some more win-now talent. You had Jeremy Grant often linked to rumors for Patrick Williams, and while yes, in theory, you probably could get a nice return for Patrick, sending him to a rebuilding team that is looking to build for the future and getting a more established player in return that is in their prime now, I just don't see it happening, and I actually don't want it to happen. I think moving on from Patrick Williams this early because you're trying to win now is incredibly premature for a guy who does show a ton of potential on both ends of the floor with his size and athleticism and is only 20 years old. He was the Bulls' number 4 draft pick. the first pick made by the new front office. I mean, they really see this kid being a big part of the Bulls' future as he continues to develop, and there were a lot of promising things that we saw from Pat at the end of the season, including the playoffs. He was playing with more aggression and looking more confident out there on the offensive end. Obviously, still has a lot of work to do. With the right mentorship and coaching, though, he can get there and be a big piece for this franchise. As such, 100%, no doubt in my mind that Patrick Williams will be back for the Bulls. Next, we've got Dosunmu. Great rookie season for a guy who was a second-round pick. Wasn't expected to get much playing time with all the guards in the Bulls lineup, and I said it before the season started, I didn't think Ayo was going to be in the rotation, and even thought that he might be spending some time in the G League, but with injuries to the team, Ayo stepped up in a big way, and not just being a role player, but actually an impactful player in the starting lineup on both ends of the floor, being a lockdown defender against the opposing team's best player on most nights, as well as facilitating the offense for the Bulls. He did hit a bit of a rookie wall later on in the season, which really it seems like everyone hit a wall at the end of the year for the Bulls. But Ayo, with his play, the fact that he's only 22 and is already playing with the confidence and poise that you want to see in a professional basketball player, also the fact that this was another pick made by the front office, 100% he'll be back next season. Now, next, let's go with Zach Levine. Now, you guys know where I stand with Zach. I made a whole video about his impending free agency, how critical his free agency is going to be to the Bulls' future, and whether or not he deserves the max. So I won't go into too many details on that here, since you likely already heard my thoughts on that in that video. But in short, I don't think Zach Levine is worth a max contract of $212 million for 5 years. I think he's more in that $30 to $35 million a year range, around $175 million for 5 years. But do I think that Zach is going to get that or accept an offer below the max? No. So ultimately, I think the front office is going to offer him that 5-year, $212 million extension. I don't think there is a high chance that Levine goes to another team, because he would be leaving so much money on the table, given any other team around the league can only offer him a max of 4 years, $157 million. So you're talking about leaving a guaranteed $55 million on the table to go to a different team. Unless Zach really has his heart set on a different team or a different location, there is a lot of speculation that he wants to play in LA because he has family there. He went to school there, college that is. I believe he also has a house there as well. But again, I really can't see Zach walking away from that big of a difference in pay. Zach has made it pretty clear he wants to get paid and that he's been underpaid for the last 3 or 4 years. So I'm giving Zach Levine a 95% chance of returning to the Bulls. The only reason I'm saying 95% is because he is an unrestricted free agent. He has made it clear that he's going to be treating free agency with an open mind and considering all options. And if for whatever reason the front office decides maybe Zach isn't the guy that you want to build around and offer less than the max, that could create enough tension to where he bounces to another team. But again, I think all that is very unlikely. Zach is going to get a max contract extension and he'll be staying with the Bulls. Next, Nikola Vuchevich. Now, I know there is this perception among Bulls fans that Vuch, based on the way he played this past season, is on the chopping block and could be moved in a trade, especially considering he's on an expiring contract going into next season. And I know a lot of fans were disappointed in the way Vucevic played this season with his inconsistent play, his lack of aggression, and below average defense. But the fact of the matter is, Vucevic is actually still one of the better big men in the league by the numbers, even with a down season for him. He's one of the few players in the league who actually averaged a double-double. He's still one of the best rebounders in the league. The challenge is that Vucevic needs to be around better defenders. And when you're running alongside Levine and Derozan, who are the primary scorers, which makes Vucevic now your third option, and you don't have strong defenders when guys like Lonzo, Caruso, and Patrick Williams are out, all guys that missed a lot of time this season, Vucevic is going to struggle and isn't going to be as impactful. But look, because AK in his exit interview, as well as Billy Donovan, stressed the importance of continuity and maintaining this core, given success is shown when teams are able to play together for 3, 4, or 5 seasons. So despite the fact that Vucevic struggled this year, despite the fact that you could argue at times he didn't fit the best with this team, despite the fact that he's on an expiring contract, which is a little more easy to trade than someone who is on a long-term guaranteed deal, I still think it's more likely than not that Vucevic will be with the Bulls next season. I'm also going to give this a 95% chance, though. Next, I've got Javonte Green. Now, I made a video on Javonte earlier in the season and how he was really the Bulls' most underrated player because he just does everything that is asked. He knows his role. He knows what he needs to do on the court. He brings that energy and fire the team needs. He's a hustler, and you guys know I love those types of players. And more importantly, the Bulls have Javonte on an incredibly team-friendly deal under $2 million for this upcoming season, so he's under contract. It's an expiring deal, and yes, he could be used as a trade piece because you likely could get some value for him given he's on a friendly contract and is actually a decent player. But I don't see the Bulls shipping him elsewhere because he can be a very valuable energizer off the bench. He's not going to eat that much into your salary cap, but if the Bulls are going to look to get a little bigger, then there is a possibility that I would see them moving on from him. So I would say it's about a 90% chance of Javonte Green returning. Next, I've actually got Tony Bradley, which might surprise some of you, but it's mainly because Tony has a player option on his contract of $2 million. Tony Bradley had some nice plays here and there where he hustled to pull down offensive rebounds, but for the most part, he was pretty underwhelming and as a backup center and really fell out of the rotation once the Bulls brought in Tristan Thompson. I think Bradley is likely to opt into his player option because I have a hard time seeing him getting more elsewhere as a free agent. And if he does opt in, I think it'll be hard for the Bulls to move him in a trade. But who knows, maybe Tony will try and look for a bigger role on another team and opt out of his contract. So because of that, I'm going to give Tony Bradley about a 65% chance of returning to the team. Then I've got Coby White. I've said in the past couple weeks, I have a hard time seeing Coby returning to the Bulls next season. Now, he is still under contract on a rookie scale deal. He is extension eligible this offseason, but I don't see the Bulls agreeing to an extension with him. Too inconsistent of a player, and with how many guards the Bulls have and with how Ayo showed up this season, I think they'll either take their chances with him, set to become a restricted free agent, have him, play in a prove-it year to show he's worth a big contract extension, or the Bulls look to trade him for the right opportunity given he's on an expiring deal. He's still young, so you would think that he has some trade value. So for Coby, I think there is about a 40% chance of him returning to the Bulls next season. The next few guys I'm going to go through pretty quickly because I think it's unlikely that any of these players will actually return to the roster next year. All of them are free agents and will likely be on their way to other teams. I'm going to start with Derrick Jones Jr., who I actually like and would hope for the Bulls to keep, but I find it unlikely because the Bulls probably wouldn't offer him more than $5 million a year, which I'm sure Jones Jr. will fetch more on the open market from another team looking for a dynamic wing. But if the Bulls can get him on a favorable deal, it's never bad to have a dynamic athletic wing like Derrick Jones Jr., but I'm giving it about a 15% chance that Derrick returns. The last three players, Tristan Thompson, Troy Brown Jr., Matt Thomas, I'm giving a 0% chance of returning. All of them are going to be free agents, and none of them are going to be returning. Tristan Thompson, as you guys recall, was brought onto the team after getting bought out by the Pacers, and that was really just done to give the Bulls some more size. I mean, he's really not part of the Bulls' long-term plan. Troy Brown Jr., I do have to say, has been one of the bigger disappointments from this season for me because I really thought he was going to be a solid rotational player for the Bulls this year. I figured he was going to be DeMar's main backup at the 3, and he showed some flashes here and there, but not enough to where the Bulls are going to give him a qualifying offer. He would become a restricted free agent if the Bulls do make him a qualifying offer, but again, I don't see that actually happening. And then for Matt Thomas, the guy really just isn't an NBA player. Decent shooter at times, and the Bulls do need shooting, but they need someone that can actually play an ounce of defense on the court. I'll be honest, I'm pretty surprised and shocked that Matt Thomas stayed on the team throughout the season while you had all these other guys getting waived like Alize Johnson, Stanley Johnson, Alfonso McKinney, all guys who were bigger when the Bulls needed that extra depth in the front court. But it doesn't matter, Matt Thomas definitely is not going to be coming back. Anyway, those are my predictions on who I think will be staying with the Bulls going into next season and who will be heading off in another direction. I want to know what you guys think, though. Who do you think will be staying put or on their way out? And if it differs from my list, let me know in the comments. And as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.